Hi, my name is Giselle, and my sister-in-law broke into my house, took my $10,000 wedding dress, the one my mother left me before she died, and wore it as a Halloween costume. She brought it back stuffed in a plastic shopping bag, soaked, torn, stinking of cheap wine. They all said I was overreacting, my husband, his family. They called it just a dress. But when did just a dress become permission to trample over someone's memory? Why did everyone else get to laugh, while I was the only one grieving? And when I finally stood up for myself, why did that make me the villain? Would you have stayed quiet? It was supposed to be a quiet Monday, one of those days where the stillness wraps around you like a favorite blanket. Gideon had left early for a project site 2 towns over, and I had the whole house to myself. No phone calls, no meetings. Just the rhythm of soft laundry spinning in the dryer, the smell of eucalyptus candles drifting through the hallway, and the golden light of late afternoon warming up the hardwood floors of our old Savannah home. I was folding towels in the living room when I remembered the garment bag. The gown. I had planned to take it out that evening, just to air it before the anniversary photo shoot next weekend. That dress wasn't just a dress. It was my mother's wedding gown, carefully restitched, reshaped, re-loved into something new for me. I had worn it once, on the day Gideon and I set our vows under a canopy of moss-covered oaks. After that, I'd kept it safely stored, away from sunlight and hands. I made my way upstairs, humming a little, still cradling a stack of folded pillowcases. When I opened the guest room closet to tuck them away, the garment bag was gone. I stared at the empty rod for longer than I should have, blinking, as if it might reappear if I focused hard enough. Maybe I had moved it. Maybe Gideon had taken it to get it pressed without telling me. I dropped the pillowcases onto the bed and checked our bedroom closet. Nothing. The linen closet? Empty. I opened the trunk at the foot of our bed. No dress. My stomach began to twist slowly, coiling inward. I checked the hallway closet, the laundry room, the attic stairs. I even opened the basement door and peered down, though I hadn't touched that place in months. It wasn't there. Sweat prickled behind my ears. I retraced my steps, trying to remember the last time I saw it. I knew exactly where I left it. That specific corner of the guest room closet, wrapped in its ivory bag with gold script from the boutique. I had zipped it up myself after the wedding. I hadn't touched it since. That dress was worth $10,000, monetarily, yes, but sentimentally, it was priceless. A legacy of lace passed through 3 generations. I took a slow breath and pulled out my phone. I called Gideon, straight to voicemail. He rarely picked up when he was on site, but this time I left a message. Hey, it's me. Quick question. Did you, by any chance, move my wedding dress? No answer. I stood frozen in the doorway of the guest room, thoughts racing faster than I could catch them. The only other person who had access to our house, besides me and Gideon, was Callista Vexley, my husband's little sister. 23, charming, reckless. She had a key for emergencies, though the definition of emergency had stretched over time to include crashing on our couch after parties, borrowing shoes, using our guest bathroom because campus bathrooms are disgusting. I didn't mind, at least I hadn't, until now. A memory surfaced, Callista borrowing my vintage silk scarf for a photo shoot and returning it stained with bronzer. Oops, she had said. You can barely see it, though. I felt a jolt of dread slide through me. Could she have? No, she wouldn't. But the door hadn't been tampered with. There was no sign of forced entry, no broken windows, just an empty hanger where my wedding dress should have been. I walked slowly into the guest room, eyes scanning every inch. That's when I saw it. Just below the closet threshold, on the polished floorboard, 3 small droplets of deep burgundy. Wine? I knelt, sniffed the spot. Definitely red wine. I turned slowly, and my eyes landed on the vanity mirror across the room. A faint smudge of lipstick, Callista's signature mauve, curved on the bottom corner like a half-finished smile. A detail so minor, yet completely damning. It wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a cleaning crew error or a miscommunication. Someone had been in my room, in my closet, wearing that dress. My hands started to tremble. Not from fear, no, this wasn't fear. It was something colder, more brittle, the sensation of something sacred being defiled without apology. I didn't cry. Not then. I reached for my phone again and scrolled down to Callista's name. My thumb hovered over it, but I couldn't bring myself to hit call. What would I say? What if she denied it? Worse, what if she laughed? The room spun just slightly as my body caught up to what my brain already knew. The dress was gone. Not lost, not misplaced, taken. And the only person arrogant enough to believe she could get away with it was the same one who once said, "Your taste is too elegant for casual wear, but I'd totally rock it for fun." I stood in that room, the air heavy with perfume and betrayal, and whispered aloud, "Don't let this be what I think it is." I sat at the edge of the bed in the guest room, still gripping my phone, Callista's name glowing on the screen. The sun had dipped behind the Spanish moss outside, and the orange light in the room faded into gray. I didn't press the call button. I couldn't. Instead, I sent her a simple text. "Do you have my dress?" Nothing. I stared at the message for a moment, watching the read receipt flicker on, then off. She'd seen it. She just didn't care enough to respond. I felt something hollow stretch inside me, like a rubber band pulled too far, one more tug away from snapping. I texted again. "Callista, answer me." Still nothing. The hallway clock ticked louder than usual. I paced back and forth, trying to slow my breathing, trying not to imagine the worst, though it was already too late for that. My gut knew the answer. My gut had known the moment I saw that lipstick on the mirror. The front door clicked open just as I reached the bottom step. Gideon stepped inside, unwrapping his scarf and setting down his keys with that same casual rhythm he always used when he thought life was predictable. "Hey, babe," he called out, shrugging off his coat. "Everything all right?" "No." My voice came out flatter than I intended. "It's not." He looked up. "What's going on?" I crossed my arms, heat rising in my chest. "Where's my wedding dress?" His brows drew together. "What? Why would I know?" "Because it's gone, Gideon. It's not in the closet. It's not anywhere." He blinked. "You sure you didn't move it?" I gave him a look that cut right through the question. "I know exactly where I left it." He held up his hands like I'd accused him of arson. Okay, calm down." I hated that. "Don't tell me to calm down." He let out a sigh and headed toward the kitchen. "Maybe Callista stopped by." Exactly what I was thinking. I followed him. "She hasn't answered my texts. I think she took it." He paused mid-reach for the refrigerator handle. "Why would she take your wedding dress? Why did she take my scarf last year? Or your mom's pearls for that party? You think she wouldn't do it again?" He didn't answer, just rubbed his forehead like this conversation was giving him a headache instead of giving me a full-body breakdown. Before I could say anything else, we heard it. A car pulling into the driveway. Tires grinding against the gravel in that careless way Callista always drove. I moved to the window and peered through the curtains. There it was. Her beat-up red Civic, dented on the passenger side, windows down even though it was cold out. She didn't even knock. The front door opened like she lived here. Like she hadn't just ghosted me all day. "Hi," she called cheerfully, her voice bouncing through the hallway. "I brought it back." I froze. Gideon stepped back into the room, but I didn't move. Callista walked in like she was returning a blender. She held a wrinkled, damp plastic Target bag in one hand, swinging it slightly as if it weighed nothing. "Here you go," she chirped. My heart stopped. She placed the bag on the kitchen counter with zero ceremony. I approached it slowly, like it might contain something radioactive. My fingers hesitated at the handles, then pulled the plastic apart. The first thing that hit me wasn't the sight, it was the smell. Cheap wine, stale perfume, smoke. The scent clawed at my throat before I even laid eyes on what was inside. The dress, what used to be my mother's wedding gown, was crumpled, soaked, twisted like a used tablecloth. The lace was torn along the hem. A deep red stain bled through the midsection, almost black under the kitchen light. Sequins clung to the bag like they'd tried to escape. My hand shook as I pulled part of it out. The silk clung to itself, warped and puckered, as if it had been dragged through a storm drain. I looked up. Callista was texting. My voice cracked. What did you do? She glanced up, unfazed. What? Oh, yeah. Some girl spilled a drink on me, and I think I caught the hem on a table leg or something, but I didn't mean to, ruin it or whatever. You wore it? Well, yeah. I needed something for the costume thing. My mouth went dry. You wore my wedding gown, my mother's dress. She blinked. I didn't know it was that one. It was in a bridal bag, in a closed closet. She shrugged. It looked old. I thought it was vintage or something you didn't care about. I looked to Gideon, waiting for him to say something, anything. He opened his mouth and closed it. I turned back to her. That was the most important thing I owned. You're being super dramatic, she said, folding her arms. It's just a dress. No, it's not. My voice dropped. It was the dress my mother gave me before she passed. It's the dress I wore the day I promised your brother I'd stand beside him, and you turned it into a bar prop. She rolled her eyes. Okay, now you're making me feel bad. You should. I said I didn't know. But you didn't ask either. She huffed. You always act like everything has to be sacred. Not everyone's that uptight, Giselle. I took one step closer. Get out. Are you serious? Out of my house. Her mouth opened again, but Gideon finally spoke. Callista, just give her some space, all right? She stared at him, lips parted in disbelief. You're taking her side? I'm not taking sides. I'm asking you to leave. Callista shook her head, swiping her bag off the counter. This is ridiculous. She stormed out the front door, slamming it hard enough to rattle the glass. I stood there for a moment, staring at the bag still on the counter, unable to move. My chest ached, not from anger anymore, but from something far more bitter. I picked up the dress, still dripping, and carried it to the staircase. I sat on the bottom step, the wet fabric pooled in my lap. The room was silent except for the ticking of the clock. And then, barely a whisper, I heard myself say, I should have locked that damn closet. The light through the kitchen window was already harsh by the time I opened my eyes. I hadn't made it upstairs the night before. Instead, I had fallen asleep curled on the living room couch, the ruined gown still lying in a pile on the ottoman like a wounded animal. Its scent had seeped into the air, cheap liquor and something synthetic, clinging to the walls as if daring me to forget. I sat up slowly. My back ached from the awkward position I'd slept in, and my neck protested every movement. I pulled the Afghan off my shoulders and set it aside, forcing myself upright. The kitchen was quiet, too quiet. The coffee pot sat untouched on the counter. Normally, I would have heard Gideon's footsteps by now, the clink of a spoon stirring sugar, maybe even his usual whistle. But there was nothing. Just the ticking of the wall clock and the soft hum of the fridge. I tried to eat, scrambled some eggs out of routine more than hunger, but I couldn't bring myself to swallow more than 2 bites. Every part of me felt clenched, coiled, like my body was waiting for something, but didn't know what. The dress was still on the ottoman when I passed it again, the bottom layer trailing onto the rug. I couldn't bring myself to fold it. Couldn't bring myself to put it away. Every time I looked at it, all I saw was my mother's face the day she gave it to me. It's yours now, she'd said, her voice warm and scratchy from age. Not just for your wedding, but for every strength you carry from this day forward. She had worn that dress when she married my father under the courthouse tree. My grandmother wore it too, decades earlier, in a small chapel upstate. 3 generations of women, all in the same silk and lace, all believing in love enough to pass something so fragile between them. And when my mother gifted it to me, she hadn't known she'd be gone within the year, but I think she sensed it. She had handed me a letter with the gown, folded carefully into a blue envelope. I'm giving you this not for a wedding, it said, but for the woman you're becoming. May this dress never just be fabric to you, but the thread that reminds you who you are, even when others try to undo it. I hadn't read that letter in a long time, but it played in my head now, word for word. I didn't cry, not yet. I heard the shower upstairs. Gideon was awake. I stood by the kitchen island, arms crossed, waiting for him to come down. Maybe he would say something. Maybe now, after seeing what his sister had done, he would say something meaningful. An apology. A plan. Something. He appeared in the doorway 15 minutes later, hair damp, a travel mug in hand. He was dressed for the office. His eyes met mine. "Morning," he said. No pause, no question. He didn't look at the dress. Morning," I answered, quieter than I meant. He moved to the fridge, took out the orange juice, poured it into a glass. The silence was thick. "You saw it," I said finally. "You saw what she did." He kept his back to me. "I did." "You saw the condition it's in." He nodded. "You saw her face, her tone, me." He set the glass down, took a sip of coffee. "She didn't mean to destroy it." I stared at him, stunned. "That was the most sacred thing I owned, Gideon." He exhaled, leaning against the counter like this conversation exhausted him. "It's just a dress, Giselle. I know it meant a lot, but you're acting like it's a person." I felt my chest go tight. It was a piece of my mother, a piece of me, and she wore it like a joke. "You're overreacting." That was it. The thread snapped. I turned and walked away, my bare feet silent on the hardwood, but my rage echoed in every step. I didn't go far, just into my home office, but it felt like miles. Like stepping into a different world where my feelings mattered and my voice wasn't muted under the weight of Gideon's passive indifference. I sat at my desk, hands folded. For a few minutes, I stared at the blank notepad in front of me. Then I began to write. I didn't filter it. I wrote exactly what I remembered from last night. The way Callista smirked, the sound of the Target bag hitting the counter, Gideon's silence, the way my hands shook when I touched the dress. Then I made a second column, labeled it emotions, grief, violation, disgust, isolation. I circled the last word twice. Then I leaned back and looked around my office. The bookshelf, still full of volumes my mother once owned. The photos on the wall, one of me and Gideon on our wedding day. Another of my mother and I, arms linked, smiling in a way I hadn't done in months. My eyes drifted to the closet door. I stood, walked to it slowly, and opened it. It was neat, predictable, my scarves, my blazers, a few pairs of shoes in their boxes, nothing out of place, but it still made my skin crawl. The idea that someone in this house thought it was okay to treat my space, my things, like they didn't matter. I closed the door gently and rested my palm against it. That's when it hit me. They hadn't just damaged the dress. They had trampled over my memories, my history, my trust, and not one person in that house seemed to care enough to stand beside me. I spoke aloud, barely above a whisper. They didn't just ruin my dress. They ruined the last piece of her I had left. After I whispered those words into the dim silence of my office, I sat there for a while, staring out the window. The sky had already turned a dull, overcast gray, mirroring the numb fog in my chest. My thoughts ran in quiet circles, looping between anger, grief, and a strange kind of clarity I hadn't felt in a long time. The house was silent again. Gideon had left for work without another word. I didn't follow him to the door. I didn't want to. Around noon, I made a sandwich I didn't eat and poured a glass of iced tea. I let sweat onto the counter. I picked up my phone to scroll, distract, escape. That's when the text came in. "Gideon, Mom wants to talk. She's inviting us all over tonight. 6 p.m., just dinner, family stuff." I stared at the screen, reread the words. My stomach turned. Family stuff. That was code. In the Rourke house, family stuff meant intervention disguised as politeness. It meant eyes across a table, mouths smiling too tight, and a script that everyone but me had already rehearsed. Still, I typed back, "Fine." Then I stood up, walked to the hallway mirror, and looked myself dead in the eye. "They think they're going to fix me," I muttered, "but I'm not the one broken." By the time we pulled into his parents' long driveway, the sun had dipped behind the trees. Golden hour had cast long shadows across the white brick of their colonial-style home, warm and soft, deceiving. Gideon parked the car and turned to me. "Let's just keep it civil, okay?" I didn't answer. My jaw stayed clenched. Inside, the dining room was already set, linen napkins folded just right, candles lit. The table stretched too long, too formal for what was supposed to be just dinner. Callista was already there, perched at the far end like she owned the evening. Her hair was curled, her blouse spotless. She was sipping lemonade through a glass straw, scrolling her phone like nothing had ever happened. Mrs. Rourke came up to greet us. "Giselle," she said with that same saccharine smile she'd perfected for guests and appearances. "We're so glad you could make it, dear." I nodded. "Of course." We sat down. Small talk murmured through the room like static, meaningless, constant, grating. I stared at the untouched salad in front of me, the glass of white wine I wouldn't drink. Finally, Mrs. Rourke cleared her throat and folded her hands. "So, Callista's told us about what happened." I tilted my head slightly. "Which part?" She hesitated, just a flicker. "About the dress. The dress she stole." Her lips tightened. She didn't realize it was important. It was a mistake. I let that hang in the air for a moment, then said calmly, "That gown was my mother's. It's been in my family for 3 generations." She didn't know that, Giselle. She didn't ask. Callista, who hadn't looked up once, finally said, "It was hanging in a guest closet like some old costume. How was I supposed to know it was the holy grail of dresses?" I leaned forward. "You opened a closet that wasn't yours, took something that wasn't yours, wore it, ruined it. And you think I'm being unreasonable for caring?" Callista rolled her eyes. "You're acting like I set the house on fire." "It might have been easier to replace the house," I shot back. "All right," Gideon said, holding up a hand. "Let's not turn this into a full-blown crisis." My eyes snapped to him. "It already is, and you're still minimizing it." He shrugged, exasperated. "It's just a dress, Giselle. You've said it yourself. It's a symbol. That's not the same as it being irreplaceable." It was irreplaceable. A murmur of agreement floated from his aunt at the end of the table. His cousin leaned over to whisper something to her boyfriend, and they both smirked. I felt like I was on a stage, naked under the lights, being told the show must go on, even as everything collapsed around me. I pushed my chair back slightly, not to stand, but just to breathe. "Do you know what it's like?" I said, eyes sweeping the table. "To be robbed by someone you had dinner with last week? Someone who smiled at you, called you sis, and then treated your most sacred thing like a party joke?" No one answered. "I do," I said. "And I'm sitting at a table full of people pretending that's okay." Mrs. Rourke reached for her wine glass. "We just want peace, Giselle. This kind of tension isn't healthy. Tension isn't caused by me asking for basic respect. You're making it harder than it needs to be." "No," I said. "You are." I looked at Gideon. "You all are." No one touched their food. No one defended me. No one even looked uncomfortable enough to suggest shame. Just stiff, practiced indifference. I scanned their faces one last time and realized something clicked inside me. Quietly, permanently. These weren't my people. They never had been. I stood. No chair scrape, just a soft motion. I didn't slam anything, didn't curse or cry. I just picked up my purse and nodded once. "Thank you for dinner," I said, "but I don't need to sit here and be gaslit into thinking I'm unreasonable." As I walked out, I could feel Gideon watching me. He didn't follow. The air outside was cold against my cheeks. I walked slowly down the driveway, heels clicking against the concrete, breath sharp in my lungs. Inside the car, I sat for a moment before reaching for my phone. I typed a message to my friend Elena. "Tell me I'm not crazy." I waited. A few seconds passed. Then a minute. No dots. No reply. I stared at the screen a little longer, then hit delete. Driving home, I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I just sat in that silence, letting it settle into my bones like a new kind of armor. Later that night, I walked back into the guest room. The dress was still there, untouched from the last time I'd looked at it, a shell of what it used to be. I stood over it, arms folded, thinking about everything they said. "Just a dress. You're overreacting. We want peace." If they won't listen, I whispered to the shadows, they'll feel it. The next morning, I moved through the house like I was made of glass. Every step felt too loud, too solid for how hollow I'd become inside. After the dinner at his parents' place, Gideon hadn't said much. We rode home in silence, and by the time we pulled into the driveway, he was already halfway up the stairs before I'd even closed the car door. I didn't follow him. I stayed in the kitchen, rinsed a cup that didn't need cleaning, stared at the light over the sink. I didn't sleep well. By the time the sun came through the blinds, I was sitting at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, still in yesterday's jeans. The dress was draped across the back of a chair like a ghost I hadn't invited. I couldn't shake the feeling that all of this, wasn't just thoughtless. Callista had always been careless, sure. But this felt targeted, intentional. And then I remembered something. About 6 months ago, after a minor scare where someone tried to break into our garage, Gideon had installed a basic security camera. It wasn't anything fancy. Just a discreet little black thing tucked in the corner of the front hall, aimed at the main hallway and guest room door. He'd set it up, tested it, and promptly forgotten about it. But I hadn't. I got up from the table, walked into the hall, and opened the closet where we kept the home network stuff. The camera's small receiver sat on the top shelf. I grabbed it, took it into my office, and connected it to my computer. The footage loaded slowly. I scrubbed through the file from 2 days ago, fast-forwarding through hours of nothing, sunlight moving across the walls, dust dancing in the air, empty space. Until suddenly, there she was. Callista. Just past 3 p.m. She let herself in through the front door, like she was walking into her own apartment. She didn't knock. She didn't text. She barely glanced around. I watched in stunned silence as she tossed her purse onto the table, took off her sunglasses, and walked straight to the guest room. She opened the closet, found the garment bag, unzipped it, and smiled. Not just smiled, smirked. She pulled the gown out, held it against her frame, and then, God help me, she pointed her phone at the mirror and snapped a selfie. Then she twirled in it, spun around in my hallway. She poured herself a glass of wine from the fridge, my fridge, and toasted herself in the mirror. And then, the final insult, she turned toward the camera, lifted her glass, and flipped it off. That was the moment something in me went still. I sat back in my chair, watching the screen replay again and again. I felt sick. I felt vindicated. I felt cold. I downloaded the footage, twice. One on a flash drive I kept in my jewelry box, the other on a password-protected cloud drive, just in case. That evening, after Gideon got home, I waited until he was out of his coat and settled in his office with a beer before I walked in. "Got a second?" I asked. He nodded without looking up from his screen. "Yeah, what's up?" I handed him the flash drive. "Watch that." He gave me a look. "What is it?" "Just watch it." He plugged it in, clicked the file, and for the next 5 minutes, he said nothing. The video played silently. Callista's smug little entrance, her dance with the gown, the toast, the gesture. By the time it ended, he leaned back in his chair and rubbed his jaw. "Well," he said slowly, "that doesn't look great." I folded my arms. "Still just a dress?" He exhaled. "She's immature. I'm sure she didn't think it through." I cut him off. Don't make excuses for her again." He looked at me, startled. I held my ground. "If this, all of this, still isn't enough for you to take a stand, then I'm not sure what we're doing here." Gideon didn't answer. "You have 48 hours to talk to your sister. Really talk. And if she doesn't fix this, I will." He blinked. "Fix it how?" "I'll let her know exactly what consequences feel like." Then I walked out before he could ask anything else. Less than 24 hours later, I got a text from Callista. "Callista, I found this amazing bridal rental shop. I'll rent you a new gown. Modern, actually flattering." There was a photo attached. Some cheap satin thing, strapless, too short, hanging on a clearance rack. The rage bubbled up so fast I almost couldn't think straight. I sat on the couch, phone in hand, staring at her message. That smug, performative tone, like she was doing me a favor. I typed back one sentence. "Me, You will regret underestimating me. No emojis, no punctuation flourish, just truth. I tossed the phone aside and opened my laptop. The screen glowed as I opened a blank document. Title, Civil Complaint, Personal Property Damage. I stared at the blinking cursor. Then I started typing. It wasn't just anger driving me, it was resolve. There was no more room for pleading, or talking things through, or waiting for someone else to validate my feelings. She had violated my home, my trust, my history. And now, I would make her answer for it. That night, I saved the document, shut the lid, and whispered to no one in particular. Next time, it won't be a conversation. The click of the door behind me echoed louder than I expected. Gideon hadn't said a word as I handed him the envelope. He just stared at it, like it might explode in his hands. Maybe it would. I didn't wait to see what he did next. There was nothing left to explain. The air outside was humid with the weight of early summer, thick enough to cling to skin. As I walked toward my car, a breeze rustled the dogwood trees, but it brought no comfort. I drove home slowly, without the radio, letting the silence settle deep into my bones. The next morning started like any other weekend, quiet, slow-moving. I made coffee, poured it into my favorite chipped mug, and sat at the kitchen table with the newspaper out of habit, not interest. The TV murmured faintly in the background, though I couldn't have told you what channel it was on. That's when my phone buzzed. A message from Margot, a colleague at the firm. Margot, you okay? Just saw something odd about you on the Brookwood Group Facebook page. My stomach tightened. I opened the app, searched the group, and there it was, posted just an hour ago. Imagine losing your mind over a used dress. Some people are built for drama. No name, no direct tag, but it didn't have to be. The comments exploded underneath. Classic overreaction. Poor Callista. That family has always treated her like she's nothing. Didn't the bride wear it like years ago? She always acted like the queen of the neighborhood anyway. I scrolled and scrolled, feeling the blood drain from my face. A few people chimed in defending me, bless them. But most just speculated or stirred the pot. It was cruel and exhausting. There was no context, no truth, just people playing judge, jury, and gossip columnist behind keyboards. I put the phone down, walked over to the sink, and splashed cold water on my face. 10 minutes later, a second notification popped up, this time from a woman I barely knew, Cassandra, one of Gideon's cousins. Another post, same thread. She always wanted to be the center of attention, never liked Callista, petty. That was when I knew. This wasn't accidental. This was coordinated. By early afternoon, it had bled into real life. I went to the grocery store to grab milk and dish soap, and while walking past the bakery aisle, I overheard two women whispering, just enough for my name to reach my ears. I didn't turn. I didn't need to. But back at the office Monday morning, it got worse. I walked into the break room just as two coworkers were laughing about something. As soon as I stepped in, they both paused like they'd been caught shoplifting. One of them, Janelle, someone I used to like, smiled too quickly. Hey, Giselle! We were just, talking about wardrobe disasters. You know, spilled wine, ruined dresses. The other chimed in, trying to be funny. Heard you're suing over fashion. You should have been a stylist instead of an accountant. I didn't smile. I didn't respond. I poured my coffee and left the room. I felt exposed. Like everyone had seen me naked, but not really me. Just a version of me they'd invented from secondhand comments and first-class malice. That night, after I got home and kicked off my shoes, I sat on the edge of the bed and opened my messages. A ping came through from Tasha, an old friend from college I hadn't spoken to in months. Hey, I know things are messy, but I thought you should see this. Attached were screenshots, group chats, posts, names I recognized. Callista again, writing with the tone of someone who'd never known consequence. Callista. I wore it better than she ever did. That dress deserved a night out. Another message, seconds later. Callista. She's being a child. Imagine making that much fuss over a thrift store heirloom. Thrift store heirloom. I stared at the screen until the light blurred. Then I closed my eyes and took the longest breath of my life. I didn't cry. Not this time. I walked over to my desk, opened my laptop, and deactivated my Facebook account. Then I shut down everything else. Instagram, LinkedIn, gone. If they wanted to talk, they'd have to talk to each other, without access to my life. I opened my gallery, found a photo I'd taken 2 days after the dress came back, hung on a plastic hanger in the laundry room, stained and frayed, the train dragging on the tile like something broken and abandoned. I posted it on my professional page with a single caption: "This is not just a dress." No tags, no explanations, just that. By morning, the comments were rolling in, quiet, thoughtful ones. This hurts to look at. My grandmother's dress was lost in a fire. I get this. People need to understand that value isn't always financial. I didn't respond to any of them. I just read. Then I got dressed, printed the final copy of the civil suit, and placed it in a manila envelope. I waited until Gideon was in his office, then knocked lightly and stepped inside. He turned, surprised to see me holding paperwork. "This is what 72 hours looks like," I said. "You had 48 hours since." "I gave you more. I've done enough waiting." He reached for the envelope, but I didn't hand it over yet. "You can give this to her. Or not. Doesn't matter. It's filed either way." His mouth opened slightly. "Giselle, no," I said. "No more conversations." I set the envelope down, turned, and left the room. As I walked back to the foyer, shoes clicking softly against the wood, a calm settled over me. Not peace, exactly, but something close to it. Resolve. Let's see how loud silence can be. I didn't expect the invitation when it came. Gideon forwarded me a message from his mother, short and polite in that carefully distant way she mastered long ago. "We're hosting a family barbecue this Saturday. Just a small gathering. Would love for you to come. Might be good to talk things out." "Talk things out," I muttered, reading it aloud like a punchline to a joke no one laughed at. Gideon offered no commentary, just shrugged and said, "You don't have to go." But maybe it's a step forward. A week had passed since the lawsuit was filed. In that time, I'd packed a small overnight bag and stayed with a friend in Midtown. I needed space, and he didn't argue. I suspect he welcomed the quiet. But I agreed to attend. Maybe I needed to see their faces one more time, without illusions. Maybe I needed to hear what they'd say when there were no screens, no keyboards, no curated Instagram captions, just flesh and bone and raw discomfort. Saturday evening came humid and still, the kind of southern heat that made your clothes cling before you even sat down. I pulled into the Rourke's long circular driveway a few minutes after 6. Cars already lined the curb. Laughter trickled from the backyard, and the smell of grilled meat floated through the air like bait. I walked around the side of the house, smoothing down the back of my skirt with one hand, clutching my purse tighter than necessary with the other. As I stepped through the open gate, every conversation paused just long enough to feel like a spotlight had clicked on. Callista was by the drink table, laughing with one of Gideon's cousins. Her face faltered for a half-second when she saw me, then returned to brightness like a light switch. Everyone else gave polite nods, the kind you offer guests you hope won't stay too long. I said hello, kept my tone light, and found a corner near the rose bushes. I didn't eat, didn't drink, just waited. About 30 minutes in, Gideon raised a glass of beer and tapped the side with his wedding ring. "I just want to say thank you to everyone for coming. These past few weeks have been tense, but I believe in family. I believe we can heal, even from big mistakes. So here's to letting go and moving forward." I watched him, watched the way he scanned the crowd, never quite meeting my eyes. The glasses clinked. Callista took a sip of her wine, then let out a snort loud enough to silence her entire table. "Some people can't move forward," she said, swirling her drink, "because they're too busy clutching onto dresses they'll never wear again." My spine went rigid. She didn't say my name. She didn't have to. No one reacted. Not Gideon, not his parents. Just an awkward pause, then a forced chuckle from someone trying to keep things light. I didn't respond. I didn't look at her, but I felt my fists curl tight in my lap. Dinner was served buffet style. Everyone filled their plates, avoided my side of the patio. I wasn't there to mingle, and they knew it. Later, when the sun had dipped low and the sky turned the color of rust, Callista approached, wine in hand, smile soft and false. "Can we talk?" she asked. I gave a slight nod, led her to the far side of the lawn where no one else stood. She didn't waste time. "You don't have kids, Giselle," she said softly, almost gently. "What were you even saving that dress for?" I blinked. She stepped closer, her voice just above a whisper. "You clung to a fantasy because there's nothing else for you to pass down. That dress was all you had, and that's really sad." She smiled. It wasn't cruelty by accident. It wasn't immaturity. It was cold, clear calculation. She wanted to wound. And she succeeded. I turned without a word and walked back toward the house. Conversations resumed behind me, forks clinking against plates, laughter bubbling back up like a sitcom laugh track. No one followed me. I made it to the car before the first tear fell. Not from sadness, not even rage. It was something deeper, something that felt like recognition. I screamed, loud, raw, primal, the kind of scream that empties you out. And then I laughed, sharp, short, bitter. "I needed that," I whispered. Back home, I pulled the ruined dress from its box again. I sat with it draped across my lap in the dim living room, just like I had the night Callista returned it in that plastic bag. This time, though, I wasn't mourning. I was remembering. I reached for the envelope, the one my mother had tucked inside the bodice when she gave it to me. The letter was short, typed on old stationery, her handwriting looping at the bottom. "If they ever make you feel small, remember you came from a line of women who stitched their own worth." I folded the letter again, kissed the corner, and slid it back into the envelope. Then I picked up the phone and called the best preservationist in Savannah. "Hi," I said. "I need to preserve a gown. It's damaged, but I don't want it restored. I want it exactly as it is." A pause on the line. "You want to preserve the damage?" "Yes," I replied. "I want to remember it as it survived, not as it was ruined." We scheduled the drop-off for the next day. Before bed, I posted one final story. A photo of the dress, still stained, hanging in my office. Caption: "My silence ends in court." 2 weeks came and went with the kind of slow burn that made each day feel longer than the one before. The silence wasn't just mine anymore. It echoed in every hallway, every meal left untouched. Every night, Gideon didn't bother asking where I'd been. By the morning of the hearing, I wasn't nervous, I wasn't scared. I was simply ready. I chose a navy blue dress, simple, clean lines, no embellishment. My mother used to say, "There's power in dressing with dignity, especially when others expect you to come undone." I pinned her locket inside the neckline and straightened my shoulders in the mirror. By 8:30, I was parked outside the courthouse. The Savannah Civil Courthouse wasn't anything grand. No soaring marble, no sweeping steps, just brick, glass, and quiet authority. I walked through the doors with a folder pressed to my chest like armor. Inside were the documents, the screenshots, the stills from the video footage, every piece of truth I'd gathered with surgical precision. Gideon was already there. He sat on the bench just outside the courtroom, legs crossed, scrolling through his phone like he was waiting for a dentist appointment. Next to him was Callista, lip gloss shiny, sunglasses perched atop her head indoors, heels that clicked with every shift of her leg. She saw me approach and smiled. Small, smug, I didn't return it. The courtroom wasn't crowded, just the judge, the attorneys, a court reporter, and a few scattered observers, mostly from the local press. They always sniffed out family drama that reeked of old money and new scandal. We were called to stand. The judge, a tall woman with wire-rimmed glasses and a reputation for not suffering fools, nodded at both tables. "Let's begin." My attorney, Mr. Lewin, spoke first. Calm, methodical. He laid out the timeline, the gown's provenance, the emotional and financial value. Then he asked me to take the stand. I walked up slowly, not from hesitation, but from intention. I sat, adjusted the mic. He asked me about the dress. I spoke clearly. "It belonged to my mother. She gave it to me before she passed. I wore it on my wedding day." It was supposed to be preserved, passed down again. He asked me what happened. My sister-in-law entered my home without permission. She removed the gown from storage, She wore it to a party. She returned it in a plastic bag, stained, torn, soaked in alcohol. The room was silent except for the soft tapping of the court reporter's keys. Then, the footage. The screen lit up as the clip played. Callista, unlocking the door, going straight to the guest room, pulling out the gown, spinning, drinking wine, smirking into the mirror, and then, the middle finger to the camera. Someone in the room audibly sucked in a breath. I didn't turn to see who. My attorney rested his case. Callista's attorney approached the bench. He was younger than expected, overconfident. "Ms. Vexley, could you tell us what your understanding of the dress was?" She stood, twisting a strand of hair. "I thought it was just, an old gown. I didn't know it was like the dress. It wasn't labeled. It was just in the closet." He nodded, as if she'd just solved the case. "So you didn't know?" "No," she said. "I just thought it would be fun." He paused. "And the video, do you deny its accuracy?" Callista bit her lip. "I was joking. It was just a dumb moment." Then came the screenshots. My attorney walked to the screen and clicked through them like flipping a photo album. I wore it better than she ever did. That dress deserved a night out. Can't believe she's crying over thrift store nostalgia. Silence. The judge finally spoke. "This is not a matter of misunderstanding. This is not an accident. What I see is intentional negligence laced with personal disrespect. This wasn't about a piece of clothing. It was about violating someone's space, her memories, and doing so with no regard for consequence." Her gavel tapped once. "I rule in favor of the plaintiff, Giselle Carlisle." I exhaled for the first time in what felt like hours. The defendant will pay damages covering emotional distress and property destruction. Full legal fees are to be reimbursed. An official written apology must be submitted within 24 hours. Callista sat down like she'd been deflated. Her eyes watered, not out of remorse, but humiliation. Gideon looked at me, said nothing. I stood, nodded at the judge, and walked out. Outside, the reporters waited. Cameras clicked. Microphones extended. "Miss Carlisle, do you have a statement?" I stopped, turned toward them. Justice doesn't bring back what I lost, but it tells me I'm not invisible. Then I walked past them, past Gideon, past Callista, who now refused to meet my gaze. He called after me. "Giselle, wait." I kept walking. That night, I sat on my porch with a glass of iced tea and watched the sky turn lavender. An email pinged on my phone. Subject: Formal apology. C. Vexley. I opened it, stared at the body of the message for half a second, and hit delete without reading. Forgiveness isn't silence, it's closure. The sun rose slower these days, or maybe I just noticed it more now. It had been almost a full month since the verdict, and in that time, something in me had softened. But not in the way they probably hoped. It wasn't forgiveness for them. It was grace for myself. I'd moved into a small apartment in downtown Savannah. One bedroom, exposed brick, tall windows that let in just enough morning light to make the coffee taste better. The landlord was an older woman who brought her dog to collect rent. The neighbors were quiet, and the air was mine. Sometimes I'd drive past the house Gideon and I used to share, not out of longing, there was none of that left, but out of a kind of curiosity. The way you look at a place that once held a version of yourself you'd outgrown. I never stopped, never turned down the street, just glanced in the rearview mirror as it disappeared behind me, smaller every time. Gideon hadn't reached out since court. Neither had Callista. I didn't expect them to. One afternoon, just after closing the front door of my new place and setting down a box of bridal catalogs, I walked into my newly rented storefront on a quiet corner off Whitaker Street. The sign hadn't been installed yet, but the name was already etched in my heart. Second Grace. It wasn't just a boutique. It was something else. Something still becoming. The walls were still bare except for one. On it hung a simple wooden frame, inside of which was a carefully preserved piece of torn lace, the corner of the ruined gown. Next to it, mounted under glass, was the note from my mother, the one she wrote when she gave me the dress, now aged into sepia along the folds. Below both, engraved on brushed brass, "Wear love, not perfection." Brides came in slowly at first. Women who weren't looking for spectacle, but stories. Some cried when they saw the dresses. Others laughed nervously, unsure if they belonged in something so soft. But they did. They all did. A few weeks into opening, Mr. Lewin, the attorney who'd helped with the lawsuit, stopped by with 2 coffees. "You've got your hands full," he said, nodding toward the fitting area where a young woman was twirling in front of a mirror. "I do," I smiled. "And I like it that way." He sipped his drink. "Ever think about wearing that smile again, for someone else?" I raised a brow, amused. "Was that your version of subtle?" He laughed. "Just planting seeds." I didn't say yes, didn't say no. Just sipped my coffee and watched the girl in the mirror adjust the veil with reverence. That afternoon, a bride named Carla came in with her grandmother. She'd just gotten engaged and couldn't afford anything near the prices she'd seen online. Her voice trembled when she told me she thought maybe she didn't deserve the big moment. I helped her into a soft chiffon gown, then knelt behind her and pinned the back. "You deserve to feel treasured," I said. "Not just loved, treasured." When she turned around and saw herself, she burst into tears. So did her grandmother. That night, after the last light had been turned off and the front door locked, I sat at the counter scrolling through the boutique's growing online page. Someone had shared a photo of Carla standing outside the shop, her hands over her mouth in disbelief. The caption read, "Not just dresses, she gives you back your story." I don't remember crying then. I just remember exhaling, as if I'd been holding my breath for years. Later that week, while sorting through boxes the dry cleaner had returned, I found something unexpected wedged beneath the tissue paper. A small envelope I hadn't seen before. It was addressed in my mother's handwriting, more hurried than usual, likely tucked in before the wedding day. I sat down and opened it. "If you must grieve, do it standing. If you must start again, do it with grace. You are not broken. You are becoming." My hands trembled, but not from pain this time. It was a different kind of trembling. The kind that comes when you know you've finally stepped into your own shape. I folded the letter and placed it inside a drawer in the front counter. The next morning, I opened the shop as usual. Sunlight poured in from the east-facing windows. The bell above the door chimed. A young woman entered, wide-eyed, clutching a small bouquet of silk flowers. I smiled, stepped forward, and held out my hand. "Welcome to Second Grace." And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for something to be taken from me. I was ready to give, because they hadn't broken me. They had unraveled what was never meant to stay. And I had stitched something better. This time, the thread is mine to hold. Sometimes, what people dismiss as just a dress holds decades of memory, love, and legacy. This wasn't about fabric, it was about respect. When family crosses boundaries and calls it love, how far would you go to protect your voice, your story? What would you have done if you were in my place? If stories like this speak to you, don't forget to subscribe. There are more true family stories, filled with betrayal, healing, and strength, waiting to be told. Let's face them together.